Good day, everyone. This is Ayo speaking. In this video, we are going to be seeing how we can go serverless with Azure Function service. So I'll be sharing my screen very soon so that we can see the Azure portal. Let me also say that if you are yet to subscribe to this channel, you should do so, and make sure you like all the videos so that I will be encouraged to create more content. I'm sharing my screen. Hopefully you can see my screen. Yeah, so what we're going to be looking at is how we can work with the function service on Azure. And before I start to get into it, I just want to give a little bit of background as to the usefulness of this service. And there are so many ways it differs from a virtual machine and like a web app or something, that I will just give just a single scenario that I believe depicts the differences between how it works and how the conventional way of deploying applications work. So in the case of a virtual machine, let's say you have an application. Usually an application runs on a server, and the server must always be running. So if I'm deploying an application on Azure, for example, I would have provisioned a VM, probably a Windows or a Linux VM, and I would deploy the application on a web server in that VM, probably in Nginx or Apache or something. However, in such a scenario, the VM would need to be running at all times for my application to be reachable. But that might not be the most cost-effective way of going about it, especially if, let's say, the application only gets traffic at some particular time period, or if it does not need to be running at all times as it were. So that's where this Azure Function service comes into play, and I will be showing us how we can go about it. So because of our time, I want to make sure that all my videos are less than 10 minutes, so, or at most 10 minutes. So I'll just get straight to it. So I would be searching for, I'm on the Azure console. You can get here by just going to portal.azure.com. So I want to create a function app, and I've clicked on it now. So I want to create the function app, and it's loading. Yeah, so we have the name of my subscription, and I am going to I have a resource group specifically for this. Then I give it a name. So let me give it Serverless123. Hopefully it's available. So this must be a unique name because it's a URL. So I want to choose my runtime stack. I'll be going for ASP.NET. The long-term support version 6 is fine. The region, East US is fine. I want it to be on Windows environments. Then I will be my hosting plan. So I will be speaking about this later on, very, very briefly, but I'll be leaving the default, which is serverless. And one thing I will say is that even though they call this serverless, what it really means is that you are delegating the management of the server to Microsoft. You don't want to be totally responsible for it. I know you can argue that in the case of a web app, using app service also, you are not also responsible, but we are going to see how this also differs from app service also. So let me just we've chosen our storage account. So our application insight is enabled. deployment. This is file, tags, and click. So we want to create a function app. Yeah, so I'm going to click on create now to get it created. So I am just while we wait for this to get created. So another thing I will say is that one thing that makes this differ from like your app service plan and your app service and some other services on Azure that also delegates the management of the server to Microsoft is that in this case, you are not going to be billed except there is a trigger. So later on, we are going to see how we can set different categories of different type of trigger that would that we can use to activate our application as it were. So while this is still deploying, we are going to see this very, very soon. And we'll be creating something very, very basic and we'll see how it really works. So I think this should be done. Maybe I should refresh. Yeah, it's done. So let me go to the resource. Yeah, so to get started, we need to create a function. So this is essentially what people call function as a service. So we are using functions, we are creating functions, we are decoupling our entire application into different functions, and those functions are what will essentially determine how we are going to be built, because triggers on that function are what Microsoft will use to bill us. So you can see the different type of templates for the triggers that we have. We have HTTP timer. HTTP is when you want the trigger to be activated when there is either something like a GET request or maybe a POST request or something. Then timer, probably a scenario that can be applicable for this is maybe you have an application that it's only visited maybe at night. Perhaps it's only visited at night or something, and you can set some kind of schedule that would that you can use to trigger the function. So I'll just leave the defaults. I'm going with HTTP trigger because that's what we will be using to trigger our functions. And I want to develop in Portal. We can also use VS Code and any other editor as it were. But I want to work with the Portal. So I've clicked to start. So the function is being created. So let me see my time because I want to make sure this is as short as possible. Okay. So we have our first trigger, our HTTP trigger setup. So now we want to create our function. So you just click on code plus test over here and we'll see our function. And there are also different access levels to the function. You can create a function that you want to use, that you don't want it to be accessible via just, you don't want it to be open to the public. The same way you create APIs and you might want to limit access to your APIs. But in this case, because I will also be using Postman very quickly to access it. So I left it open to public access. But even at that, there's still a function key that will be embedded to it. So we have this. One thing I will be doing is that. So this is our run.csx file. CSS is just a C# script, similar to C#, but it's a script. And we also have so it essentially contains what we want our function to do, all the configurations in our function. But we also have a function.json file that is more like the properties around our function. Yeah, it's more like properties around it. You can see that under the type here, it's HTTP trigger. I mean, we've chosen the timer-based trigger. This wouldn't be HTTP trigger. Then our authorization level is also function-based. I'll show us how to change that very soon. We also have the README file, which is a markdown file. Then going back to this, so what we are essentially going to do is, I would be giving us a simple script that will just return hello world. So let me just copy this and paste. Yeah. So yeah. So we have this. So this is just referencing Newtonsoft.json assembly file. So we use this R to reference an external assembly. If you want to reference something external, we're actually still going to be doing some more complex C# scripts. We'll be creating some more complex functions in subsequent chapters, and we'll be seeing how this works really. But this is just something very simple. So we have this, let me save, and so we can see our console over here that tells us, kind of like gives us an output to what we are really running. The same way when you are working with APIs, you would be you can be returning some information to the console. So let's test our function. So I'll be changing this to a get request because that is really what it is. Then we can leave every other thing. So let's see if it gives us what is expected. Yeah, so we can see now that the HTTP response content is hello world, which is what we have over here. So we can see that this very, very basic function actually works. If you are, I don't want to go through the entire code line by line because it will take our time, but if you are familiar with C#, this is not very different from what you would ordinarily see in C#. So we can also see this log information from what we have here. You can see C# HTTP trigger function processed a request. You can see it over here. Then if you want to run this from your browser or from Postman, you can click to get a function URL. So this is my function URL. I've copied it. Then I will be sharing my Postman. I'll be sharing Postman. Let me stop sharing and I will reshare. I will share and I'll go to Postman and share. Hopefully you can see my screen. Yeah, so I'm on Postman now. So I'll just paste the URL. You can see that there's a parameter that is unique that was appended to the URL. So this parameter, you can see the key, code, and the value. So that's why I said, even though it's open to the public, there are still some default security that Microsoft uses to ensure that it's safe. So by just knowing this salamat123 and knowing the name of the function, you wouldn't still have access if you don't have this key, as it were. So let me run this. And yes, you can see the hello world is still over here. So you can see that whether you use Postman or you try it on the console, it still works. So before we end this chapter, let me just quickly have us see an example that that uses a let's just have a look at another example that we add a parameter to what we have. So for this example, this is just hello world. So I want to modify this, and we have this. So this example, the same way you add params to an API. So the function has a URL. So we're also going to be adding a parameter to this, and I'll be doing this very, very quickly. So I've saved this. So let me try to run it from here, and hopefully I'm not going to get any error. So this is still a GET request. I will be adding a parameter, and I'll be adding an ID, and the value I'll be using 8. So we are assuming we have several customers in the API, and we want to reference customer with ID of value 8. So let me run this, and let's see if we'll see what the right response. I hope I saved the function out before I run this. Yeah, so you can see there are no errors. It's saying that you have asked for the information for customer 8. So it's referencing that value. So you can see that's what we have here. You have asked for the information for customer 8. So you can see I'm appending the ID that was passed in the URL onto this. So let me get the function URL and see how we can also make use of this in Postman. So I would stop sharing and reshare my Postman again. I really hope this video is not going to exceed 10 minutes. So I'm sharing Postman again. Yeah, so what I'm going to do now is I will just delete everything for the URL that we have here. Then I'll paste. So I also have the code over here. Then now I want to append the ID. So what I need to do is I would just use my ampersand and put ID. ID is the key and is equal to, I'll give it a value, it can be anything. So let me just give it 5 this time around. So you can see the key value. We have code containing the value for this particular unique function URL, and also the ID which I have added using ampersand. So I'm going to send, and hopefully we'll see I have asked for information for customer 5. So which is the ID that I have appended here. Yeah, so it also works quite well. So I'll stop sharing and I'm going to reshare my Edge browser one more time. So with this, I believe that we have a foundational understanding on how we can use function app service on Microsoft Azure. As I said, there are many reasons why you should want to explore function app service, but something that's one of the most obvious reasons why a lot of organizations make use of this is that it tends to be way cheaper, especially for applications that do not that have some special feature, that have some uniqueness to how they are. So for example, if I'm building an application that I will only have, that usually I have like a single traffic in a month, and maybe in an entire year I have like 10 hits or something, it makes no sense. It might not be a good idea for me to have a VM that runs every second. It will be so expensive to keep the VM running. But with serverless architecture, I can set it up in such a way that I will be billed only when there is a trigger. So that's just one of the obvious reasons why you might want to explore this. There are a lot more than that, but I'll be ending this video here, and in our next chapter, we are going to be looking at post requests. So for this chapter, what we did was mainly get requests. So we are going to be looking at post requests. Then before we delve into a real life scenario on how we can make use of function application.